Welcome to week 6 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown Applied Intelligence Program. Uh, Going again, almost wrapping up with the course now, so we're kind of in the home stretch for what most of you is your first course. So we're just wrapping it up here. So announcements: paper 2 is due now, probably yesterday, depending on when you're watching this. So just get those wrapped up. I hope to have those marked by the beginning of next week for those of you who are still doing the papers. And then the rest of you, I think we had a good Zoom session this past week. Well done for all the groups that went. And again, for those of you who haven't gone, it behooves you to probably talk to your counterparts who already went. I would also look at that PowerPoint presentation class that I handed out this past week. And then I would just remember a couple rules. Just keep it 20 to 25 minutes. Focus on the topic given, and make sure that you send me the topic sometime beforehand, just so I know what you're talking about. So again, good Zoom sessions this past week, and I look forward to the ones in the next couple following weeks for those groups that still need to go. So current events, obviously the UAV shoot down in Iran, and or potential response that didn't happen, that still might happen, that, as of Sunday, I'm still not sure exactly what is going on. But for those of you who don't know, if you've been living under a rock, the Iranians shot down a UAV, and this is a Global Hawk UAV. It's not just one of the hobby shop UAVs that you can find that you can buy off the commercially. This was a $100 million plus, very sophisticated, advanced system that was shot down by the Iranians. We were going to respond, but apparently it got called off for fear of the escalation dynamics occurring. They shoot down a UAV, we kill 100 people, then what do they? Now the ball is in the court for them to respond. I'll let you decide on whether it was good or not, or whether we should have responded more forcefully, or maybe we shouldn't respond at all. I'll let you decide on the politics of it. But I will just want to add is the one thing I don't have an answer to, and I look at these issues, is what are we trying to accomplish in Iran? Are we trying to stop them from developing a nuclear weapon? The original JICPOA, the plan of agreement, pretty much did that. Are we trying to stop them from missile tests? Okay, you have to specifically state that if that's your objective, that we want to put as much economic pressure on Iran and military pressure for them to completely cease their missile activity. Is it for them to get out of Yemen and Syria and Iraq? That's probably not going to happen. They view those as critical interests to them. It would be as if we would, Iran would ask us to, lose all our influence in Mexico or something along those lines. That's simply not a feasible course of action for Iran to pursue. So that's what I'm still trying to grapple with. And if you have ideas, please feel free to share. But what are we trying to accomplish here, and what message are we trying to give to the Iranians to say, if you do this, then our maximum pressure campaign will go away. So I'll leave it to you to figure out. And I just want to say we also had a lot of people who have this interest, Iran, in their portfolios based on some of the comments I've seen, some of the collection strategies I've seen as well. So. Probably relevant to the class as we go forward. All right, so reviewing last week, and again, I have to reiterate this: we don't stop in this class. We keep going for we might have a paper due this week, but we still have to go with our normal program. And we looked at counterterrorism. We looked at counterterrorism case studies in the EU, in Boston, Fort Hood shooting. And the underwear bombing. And the questions that should be in your mind are, why do we still have these intel failures despite the millions, billions, trillions, depending on how you count it, spent on homeland security? And what can we do going forward? Those are some of the key questions, and that brings it up to this point. when does radicalization get monitored further? At what point do we say such and such person goes on a watch list? Such and such person deserves FBI scrutiny. Is it when I passively view ISIS propaganda on the web? Well, one, there's a practicality. You can't monitor everyone that does that. ISIS has hundreds of thousands of views per month, tens of thousands of views in the United States. You can't monitor all those people, first of all. And second of all, it is a free country. I am allowed to look at extremist propaganda on the internet. So when does it get further? What happens if I, instead of just passively view, I like a ISIS Facebook or Twitter page or YouTube page? Have I now crossed a line? What happens if I actively chat with an ISIS person in Syria and I'm here in the United States and I do that? Then do I deserve further scrutiny? Have I crossed a line? Tell me where that line is where you deserve further scrutiny. What do we do for people on the radar? And this dovetails with the first question. There are people who are known to law enforcement. The Tsarnaev brother was known to law enforcement. The Orlando shooter, you saw in the EU documentary, there were people who were known on the radar, but there's not enough to arrest them. We talked about this when we had the Virginia Beach shooting a couple of weeks ago. That person was somehow on the radar. I don't know if that person is, but other mass shooters were on the radar of either law enforcement or mental health professionals, but there wasn't enough to arrest them. The Fort Hood shooting, Nidal Hassan, even if the intelligence was coordinated and stitched together, and he was on the radar of law enforcement, CID, what can you do? He didn't commit a crime till he opened fire on that soldier processing center. So there's that gap between when we know something, but there's not enough to detain and arrest. So how do we close that gap, or how do we operate in that gap? Do we have the appropriate funding structures and people to address the threat? Or is it just an issue of stuff happens? In Fort Hood shooting, yeah, there was a CID agent or a national CID or military CID agent, and there was the fusion center. All the money in the world can't make them talk. Sometimes you just have to make sure you have the right people in the right places. So I asked the question: do we still need to put more money? Do we need more systems in our post 9/11 scenario? And then maybe we should just accept it. In a free country, in a free society, that fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, allows people to have pretty ready access to guns. If you're in the United States, should we just accept that we're going to have mass shootings? We're going to have terrorist attacks, low-level terrorist attacks, I should say. There's only so much you can do if a guy wants to, if he's mentally ill or he's radicalized in some way, and all he needs to do is walk down the street, buy an AR-15, and then walk further down the street and open up on a crowded area. Is that just something we have to accept as a society? I'll leave that question up to you, but I also just want to leave this last question. We talked about Islamic extremism, and we talked about ISIS, and we've talked about the case studies I gave you, but one thing we didn't talk about is right-wing extremism, and do these same rules apply to right-wing extremists? And let's just say in Charlottesville in 2017, instead of them chanting anti-Semitic sayings, and instead of them holding Confederate flags and Nazi flags, let's pretend they were holding ISIS flags and shouting, Allah Akbar. Would we have a debate whether Charlottesville was terrorism? I'm pretty sure we would not have a debate on Charlottesville terrorism. I'm pretty sure we would not even have a Charlottesville because they wouldn't have given any permit to march if it was an ISIS flag or ISIS-led protest. So you have to ask the question, do we treat the right-wing extremists and others in the same scrutiny as Islamic extremism? So that covers week 5. For week 6, we're covering criminal intelligence analysis, and I'm shifting the lecture over to Dr. Lemieux, who is our program director and who has expertise in this field. So as we go forward, again, you can see the Lemieux lectures. You're going to ask about CompStat, which was the original intelligence-driven criminal or counter-criminal enterprise that a lot of police departments have invested in. And the question is, what led to the decline in crime in the 1990s and 2000s? Many people think it was better policing, CompStat-led policing, intelligence-led driven policing that led to the decline in crime. And a lot of money has been made by people who've claimed that. But the question is, are there other factors? Are there demographic factors? Are there other issues that might have been more prevalent? And then we're going to look at law enforcement technologies. You're going to look at Boston Marathon we looked at last week from an intelligence perspective. We're going to look at this as a post-blast or post-event investigative techniques that the Boston Marathon put together, or Federal and Boston PD put together, I should say, to catch the Tsarnaev brothers and ask the question, is this applicable for other law enforcement entities, or is this just because Boston was a high-profile attack that we can use all these whiz-bang technologies to apprehend suspects? So please let me know if there's any questions. I'll have your papers back to you hopefully by this time next week, and if there's questions or issues, let me know.